Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. AI tools have been absolutely exploding onto the market recently, and there's literally hundreds of them that people on Twitter are talking about all the time. And loads of people are saying that these AI tools are going to change the world of work and change the way that we approach work and productivity and life. Now, I've been experimenting with a bunch of these tools as they've been coming out. And so in this video, we're going to go over the 6 tools that I use every day to augment my productivity. This video is kindly sponsored by Notion, but more on them later. Let's go on to the first tool. Okay, so the first tool we're going to talk about is ChatGPT itself. Now, ChatGPT is the original AI-powered chatbot that's created by OpenAI. And OpenAI has really been the leading force in this space over the last few months because they've released GPT-3 and GPT 3.5, otherwise known as ChatGPT, and GPT-4 very recently. So how does it work? Well, essentially you go on chat.openai.com, you make an account, it is free, and now you have access to this ridiculously powerful AI chatbot that you can ask basically anything to. And then depending on whether you're on the free or the paid plan, you have options of default or legacy or even GPT-4. And so you can ask this to do almost anything. So let's have a look. Write a funny poem about Ali Abdaal. Ali Abdaal, oh Ali Abdaal, a YouTuber so tall and spry, with his love for books and tea, he's a nerd, there's no deny. So if you're feeling down and blue and just need a dose of laughter, just watch some Ali Abdaal videos and your day will be much better. Interesting. It's not bad that it's been able to come up with that kind of stuff. You can also ask it to do researchy type things. And looking at this, all of this is pretty much accurate. This gives you just a very small glimpse of what ChatGPT can do, but now I want to talk through what are my own personal actual use cases. And the main one that I use ChatGPT for is for idea generation. And I was working on one of my book chapters, and so I asked ChatGPT, I'm looking for interesting scientific case studies that link the idea of play and dopamine and novelty and productivity. Please suggest some options. And now this is pretty good. The connection between play, dopamine, novelty, and productivity has been explored in various scientific case studies. Here are a few interesting ones that you might find relevant. And it's telling me about the Rat Park experiment, about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's flow state and dopamine research, about Kent Berridge's research, about Stuart Brown's research, and about Jane McGonigal's research. Now, at this point, I was quite familiar with a bunch of these, but I wasn't really familiar with option number 3. And so I just asked ChatGPT, expand on number 3. And now it's telling me more about this study, about what happened in rodents when they injected them with dopamine, something about rewards. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, that's super interesting. I want to find out more. I asked, what is the DOI of this study? Now, DOI is the digital object identifier, and it is basically a URL that every scientific study has, so that I can click on the URL and then see if it's actually legit. And now here's where it gets interesting, and this shows one of the limitations even of this new evolved GPT-4 platform. So it's saying, I apologize for the confusion. The thing that I said is not actually a specific study, but it's a summary of studies, but it's given me a reference to an actual study that I can look up. And so I've now got the reference to the study, the neural basis of drug craving and incentive sensitization theory of addiction. And I'm thinking at this point, this is not exactly what I was looking for. So I do a quick Google search, I find the paper, I glance through the paper, and I realize, this is not the dream. ChatGPT did a really good job of essentially telling me that this was super interesting research that was very specifically tied to play, productivity, dopamine, and novelty, which is what I was looking for. But the limitation of the language model is that essentially, long story short, it just predicts the next word based on the previous word. And so a lot of the time it will make leaps of logic or just say things that are straight up not exactly true. So I tried taking a different tact. What are some real world stories or case studies that illustrate the link between play, productivity, dopamine, and variety? And it's given me a few things like Google's 20% time policy, the Finnish education system, which I knew about, and this Ludicorp gamification example, which I didn't know about, but I know it's not particularly relevant to what I want to say. And now I've asked it for 5 real world examples where adding novelty into otherwise mundane work tasks lead to increase in productivity and enjoyment, but avoid strategies that might be described as gamification. And now this is interesting: themed workdays, desk swapping, creative brainstorming sessions, walking meetings, cross-functional projects. This is kind of interesting. It's given me a few ideas for interesting avenues that I want to explore. I'm interested in this walking meetings concept. I know Bruce Daisley talks about it in one of his books, which is called The Joy of Work. And I want to see if there's actually any studies that show that actually taking meetings and calls and stuff while walking around helps you feel more creative and more productive, or does anything to do with dopamine. But I know that that's a research area that I'm going to explore myself. But one of the major issues with ChatGPT is that it often is at capacity. Now, I pay for ChatGPT Plus, which is $20 a month. Totally worth it for me because I use it quite a lot for this researchy stuff. So hopefully this has given you a bit of an idea of how you might use ChatGPT if you're researching stuff as well, along with some of the limitations of trying to use an AI tool exclusively for your research. And so now let's move on to tool number 2. And tool number 2 is Notion AI. Now, you guys probably know about Notion. I've been talking about it for absolutely years, I think since like 2019. And so many people that I meet on the streets tell me that they started using Notion because of watching various of my videos. And so we've got so much of our company documentation and materials and stuff all in Notion. And I've actually been using it for the last 4 years now as the prime hub for my YouTube videos. But the interesting thing that they've released recently is Notion AI. And because we've been using it for so long, we've got a pretty good relationship with the guys at Notion. And so we dropped them an email being like, hey, we're gonna make a video about these AI tools mentioning Notion AI. Would you like to sponsor the video? And they very kindly said yes. And so this video is officially sponsored by Notion. And so you can harness the power of AI within your Notion pages itself. So let's start with something basic. This is a video that I want to make at some point, 7 techniques for staying organized and productive. We're going to just see what does the AI offer us the option of doing. So essentially within the Notion workspace, you just hit the space bar and now you can access the AI features, brainstorm ideas, blog post, outline, social media post, press release, creative story, essay, loads of other options. And so I can just give it a prompt. All right, and let's see what it does. Here we go. It's not bad. Introduction, create a to-do list, prioritize tasks, use a calendar or planner, minimize distractions, take breaks, delegate tasks, stay organized, recap, etc., etc. But I don't like the fact that this is a bit basic. I want it to be a bit more evidence-based because that's my jam. Redo, but cite evidence for each of the main points in the video. Okay, here we go. This is getting better. Create a to-do list where they've got studies conducted by Harvard Business Review, Dominican University, calendar planner, take breaks. Okay, this is all very good. But the other limitation, as we've already talked about, is that sometimes it does make things up. Redo, but please include a DOI URLs when you're citing studies. Let's see what happens. Okay, so this is pretty good. This is not bad. Within about 2 minutes of work, we've gotten 7 different tips with a bunch of DOI studies. Now, the crucial thing is, let's see if these are actually legit. A study by the University of Illinois found that brief breaks can improve focus and productivity. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna Google this. Boom. Let's see what happens. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And it seems like none of these are actually legit because I've tried Googling all these DOIs and I've seen what these studies even are. And so again, pointing to the limitations of AI, it's pretty magical. It's pretty great that it's been able to create this outline for me, but now I have to go on the internet and do the research myself. Now there's another thing in particular that Notion AI is really good for, and that is summarizing stuff. And it does a pretty solid job of summarizing things that are already on the page. So for example, thanks to the Readwise integration with Notion, anything I've ever highlighted on my Kindle gets automatically imported into my Notion database. And so you can see that these are a bunch of books that I've read recently and I've got highlights for. And earlier I was working on a video, book club episode of The Pathless Path by Paul Millett, who's a friend of mine. And this is all of my highlights of the book. This is one of the books that I've got the most highlights for. And so I can use the power of Notion AI to do interesting things with the fact that I've already got my highlights in here. So here's what I did. I copied and pasted these highlights onto a new Notion page, and I gave Notion AI the prompt, use the highlights on this page to write an outline for a 3-part video about the book The Pathless Path by Paul Millett, and let's see what happens. Cool, outline. Brief, part 1, introduction, part 2, finding your path, part 3, overcoming burnout. That's pretty good. That's a pretty reasonable summary of what the main areas of the book are. And it's cool because it's literally just done that through my own personal highlights. So it's not like I've asked it, give me an outline of the book, where it will just try and crawl the internet for information. These are specifically the bits that I've personally highlighted. And so adding in that human touch and then letting the AI augment the human touch, hopefully leads to better results than just asking the AI to do its thing. I wanted some more details, so I said for each bullet point, add more detail based on my highlights. And now it's adding a little bit more detail, which is kind of nice. It also does a pretty reasonable job of making an AI summary of the book. It calls it a document. This document discusses the concept of the pathless path. Again, kind of basic. I already know what the book is about. But if I was, for example, writing an article for my website and I couldn't be bothered to summarize the contents of my highlights, I could just ask the AI to do it and then obviously do some manual in-person editing to make sure it's actually legit. The other thing I've done is use the highlights below to create a list of action points. And this is interesting because it's basically summarized my highlights into these bullet points, which could be interesting as a tweet thread, but also crucially for me, like I'm not just going to copy and paste this into a tweet thread because it's a bit basic and I don't want to do that. Instead, I'm going to look at these action points and think, ooh, what are the interesting ones here that I want to expand on? And so I now zoom out and I think, okay, cool. I've got some ideas based on the outlining that Notion AI has done and the summarizing of my highlights. Let me now actually think from my own brain, what do I want this video to be about? And the first thing I want to talk about in this video is this idea of the pathless path versus the default path. And so I've asked it, use the highlights on this page to write some bullet points describing the key differences between the pathless path and the default path. It has very kindly obliged. And then, and this is a really powerful thing that Notion does that ChatGPT does not, make the above into a table comparing the differences between the default path and the pathless path. And this is actually really solid. It's given me a table in terms of definition, fulfillment, openness to new possibilities, metrics of success for default path, for pathless path. And this is sick. This is actually something I might include in my video. And it saves me having to do the faff of, the fairly boring work of just like copying and pasting highlights and just writing it out into the format of a table. The AI is really good at doing that grunt work and doing it for me. And I'm using that to create an outline just to give my own brain some other ideas. And then in reality, what I would do is I create these like little spider diagrammy type things for the videos that I do, whether I do or don't use AI to help outline it. If this Notion AI stuff sounds interesting and you want to check it out, then do please click the link in the video description, because if you click that link, then Notion will know that you came to Notion AI through my link, and then they might also want to sponsor future videos, which would be very nice. So check it out, add it to your workspace and see if you like it. All right, tool number 3 that I use to boost my productivity is a tool called Speechify, which is an AI text-to-speech enabled software. It was initially built for people with dyslexia who find it difficult to read, but actually loads of people who don't have dyslexia also have found it super helpful as a way of boosting their productivity. especially when it comes to reading stuff. And I've actually got an interview with Cliff Weitzman, who's the founder of Speechify, over on my podcast, Deep Dive. You can check that out if you like. But Speechify is really good. And what's interesting about it is it can essentially read stuff to me. I can read pretty fast myself, but I find that sometimes as my attention begins to wander, I turn on the Speechify read feature and it just makes it a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting. And I've got like loads and loads and loads of papers here, loads of PDFs that I need to read or that I've read, and it just, it becomes a bit of a drag sometimes. And so for example, here's a paper, Back to the Future, the effect of daily practice of mental time travel into the future on happiness and anxiety. All I have to do is highlight the text, I hit Option Q.
The ability to project oneself into the future has previously been found to be related to happiness and anxiety. The purpose of the present study was to investigate the causal effect of deliberate mental time travel.
So, this is kind of fun. I've got this in my taskbar. It's the voice of Mr. President. All you have to do is select text and then the AI thingy, voice thingy will, put in the voice of whoever you want and will read the thing to you. And then of course you can speed it up and slow it down. And in fact, I'm gonna change the voice and there's loads of different voices to choose from. I quite like Nate. Do I like Nate? I do like Nate. Yeah.
Research on MTT into the future and well-being must address the issue of whether positive or negative high level frequent experience. Indeed, previous studies have not found only correlation. Of course, the most direct and unambiguous way to determine whether MTT has previous findings are controversial concerning negative future thinking and anxiety, showing both the negative MTT is related to high anxiety and sometimes reducing. The investigation of the effect of the daily practice of MTT and anxiety is purely exploratory.
I know people don't like it when I speed listen to stuff, but it's super, super helpful for me. So if I'm absorbing like a huge ass PDF that I'm not massively interested in, I'm trying to find the perfect like bit of it, I can whack this up to like 900 words per minute and just sort of like blitz like the content. And then for the bit that's particularly interesting, I can actually then read it properly and highlight it and take notes and do the thing. If you're interested in checking out Speechify, there's a link down below with some sort of discount associated with it, so you can check that out, see if you like it, if you want. All right, tool number 4 that I use to boost my productivity is a writing tool called Lex. Now, I've actually been using this since 19th of October 2022, so it's been about 6 months now. But one of the reasons I still enjoy using Lex is that it's basically Google Docs with AI built in a distraction-free writing environment. So for example, here is something I wrote the other day around YouTube changed my life. The cool thing about Lex is that its main feature, which I find useful, is autocomplete to help avoid writer's block. So for example, these days when I wake up in the morning, I'm genuinely excited to get started with work. It's a few ways to call it that, blah, blah. And now I'm thinking, okay, I want to write more stuff. So I've written, so what's the takeaway here? Why am I sharing this at all? Well, 3 main things. And now I'm going to use autocomplete and hopefully it's going to say, firstly, it's totally possible to transition out of a traditional job field into something else. It's daunting, sure, and will require a lot of hard work, but it can be done. Secondly, don't be afraid to pivot. I thought I wanted to specialize in emergency medicine and work in a hospital, but then I followed the things that were actually making me happy, and it turns out that the hospital wasn't necessarily the best option. Lastly, follow the things that make you happy. Don't stay in a job that doesn't make you happy just because it's what you're supposed to do. A bit passé towards the end, a bit basic, but the cool thing about this is that it has taken my writing style into account. This is all the stuff that I've already written myself. So it knows what my writing style is, and now it's writing in that style. It's somewhat conversational, it's not too formal. Let's try and see if there's anything else for this one. I still miss the hospital environment, the dynamic between patients and doctors, and the odd funny, sad, scary story, but I found more fulfillment, more satisfaction, more autonomy in the world of YouTube analytics and professional development. So here are my few, I honestly can't imagine going back to the hospital. It's not bad. This is actually pretty good. When I'm writing something, and just like I'm thinking, oh, I don't know what to say next, I hit Command Enter, the AI fills it out. Usually I end up deleting what the AI has written and just writing it myself because I've got an idea. But the key point is that the AI has helped me overcome the writer's block and it's given me some ideas for the thing that I actually want to say. But to be honest, full disclosure, Notion AI was not a thing when I first started using this, and you can probably do the stuff in Notion AI as well. All right, now we come to tool number 6, and that is Grain. Grain is a recording device for Zoom calls. We have been using it for absolutely years. How long has it been since I've been using Grain? This is like basically all the Zoom calls that I've had since June 2020. Damn, this is the first live session for my part-time YouTuber Academy. Essentially what Grain does is that if you're recording a Zoom call, it automatically imports into Grain, and then it will create an AI transcription of the Zoom call if you want. But also these days, it will generate an AI summary of the Zoom call. And so what you can do is you've got your Zoom call recording, you've got the AI generated transcript, you've got a summary, which is super helpful these days. That's a fairly new feature thanks to all the AI tools that are proliferating on the market these days. You can label the people, so this is a call between me and Inez and Rachel, and you can select bits and you can turn them into a highlight. So I can create a highlight out of that thing, I can look at my highlight section, and then I can share a link to this highlight. And this is nice. So actual use cases right now, it's particularly helpful for recording meetings because then we can share those meeting recordings and the summaries and the highlights with people who weren't at the meeting. But the main reason I actually started using Grain 3 years ago when I started working on my book project was because I wanted to document the entire journey of writing the book from start to finish. And so the very first Zoom calls with my editor where we're talking about the concepts, Zoom calls that I had with people like James Clear and other author friends on the internet have all been recorded on grain. It's all there. And at some point, I'm going to go through all the content, use the transcripts, use the summaries, use the highlight stuff, because I've been making highlights as I go along to turn it into a bit of a personal documentary on how the book journey's gone. All right, tool number 6 is a tool called Otter.ai, which is also an AI transcription tool, but it works a bit different to grain. It does have the option to record Zoom calls these days, but that's not what we use it for, because initially you just had to upload an MP3 and it would transcribe everything for you. Now this is super helpful for generating transcripts of our podcasts. So this massively boosted our team's productivity. So we just upload the MP3 file of the podcast once we're done, and then Amber, our podcast producer, can go through the transcripts and can essentially pick out interesting clips that we want to do for social media. They've also got an AI generated summary, which is super helpful for putting timestamps into episodes of our deep dive podcast. And the other cool thing about Otter is that I can actually use it to record on the go. And then with a single tap, it's now recording from my microphone, and it's going to transcribe in real time the things that I'm saying. And that is absolutely sick. So this is how I take notes from audiobooks. I'm just listening to the audiobook of 2 Weeks Notice by Amy Porterfield. It's really good so far. She just talks about this concept of the journaling prompt, and this sparks some thoughts, blah, 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 blah. I'll kind of say all these things, and I'll trust that the audio has been recorded and it's available for me and my team to access on the web. And also it's been transcribed. And that means if I then want to make a video about the book 2 Weeks Notice by Amy Porterfield, which is the one that I did this for most recently, and I can be like, oh yeah, these are all the thoughts I had while I was listening to this book, and therefore all of these thoughts can be compiled into some kind of format to go in the video. Pretty cool stuff, would recommend. All right, so that was a bit of a walkthrough on how I'm personally using these 6 specific AI themed tools to boost my productivity. Hopefully you got something in there that was actually helpful. If you're interested in more tips on being productive, check out this video over here, which is about 7 habits that I do every day that save me around 3 hours a day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you hopefully in the next video. Bye-bye.